The Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup continues as Harrison Lee from Locked On Winnipeg Jets joins us to talk about the Jets post-elimination in round one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Gil Martin here. The Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup continues. We welcome in Harrison Lee from Locked On Winnipeg Jets, and the Jets eliminated by the Vegas Golden Knights in 5 games. Harrison, what was the biggest reason that your team fell short against VGK?
So I think not really having a roster that was going to be, playoff competitive coming into this, I think was a big problem. We've mentioned it before that, the Jets, they haven't always made use of the cap space that they had this year. And even in the offseason, you looked at this team, you looked at the lack of roster changes, and you thought, well, Sam Gagner, some of these other guys, they're great, but they're not going to help the Jets score a lot more goals. And I think that is kind of one of the big problems. As soon as you lose somebody, you're kind of cooked. And the Jets managed to lose Perfetti, Ehlers, Scheifele, and Morrissey at various times throughout the year. And a couple of those guys kicked off right at the start of the series. So Winnipeg's run really ended before it even began.
And yet, you had the very exciting win in game one. Is there one player or players who underperformed in the series besides the guys who were out injured?
Oh, man. Yeah. So Kyle Connor, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who else? Good Lord. It's like a decent chunk of the roster, I think, will look in the mirror and ask themselves, what did we put out there? For Dubois, I know that he just doesn't care anymore. I think he wants to move on. And I think that was, I don't blame him, but that last game especially was already kind of pissing me off. I mean, the past few games with him and Kyle Connor just not really contributing anything of substance. It was hard to watch. With Connor, I don't know that it's necessarily an effort issue. I just think he's not always been there for the stuff that doesn't involve directly scoring goals. But with Dubois, we know that there's another level, and he just was absent. So, yeah, not a great situation. Let's put it that way.
Well, were there any bright spots that, from this series that can be carried forward into the summer or maybe even into next season?
Yeah, it ended. I would say Adam Lowry, I think, had a really wonderful series. I think he really showed that at times he can be a pretty nice middle six center. It probably makes him a very hot trade commodity here over the summer. Winnipeg needs to cut salary, and I think he'd bring in a pretty nice haul. I also think Dylan Sandberg, despite having a rougher end of the series, I think he responded well after that mishap that ended up killing the Jets in game 2. Or was it game 2 or game? I forget which one was the overtime loss. But, it just wasn't on his shoulders. So I think it was good to see him respond. I think that he's been a really big mainstay for this team throughout the regular season. Nice to see it not necessarily kill his confidence and his ability to do his job.
Do you think this series loss and first round exit renders the Jets season a failure?
I think for the Jets, it was always going to be some kind of a failure because unless you won the cup, this team is about to implode in the next year or two. So anything less than getting it all with this core while you still could was going to be a problem. And the Jets, they fell short of expectations multiple times. They squandered a Central Division lead. So, I guess at the end of the day, they entertained us for a bit, but the real Jets kind of showed up and reminded us why this team still has a lot of work to do.
So based on all of that, what kind of changes do you expect to see this summer as a result of this first round exit?
I could imagine the coaching staff might be on the way out. Rick Bowness, I kind of imagine, is not going to be coaching next year. I think he took one look at this season and was like, screw this, I'm out. I can't deal with this. If he and Maurice both kind of dipped, you can tell the situation is not great. I do wonder about Cheveldayoff's job security. I know that the Jets don't tend to make a lot of front office moves, but the lack of results and the fact that the Jets continue to bleed money and there's not really been a sign of clear direction from either the front office or from some of the other parts of the team, it just makes me think at a fundamental level we might see some reorg. The roster itself is definitely going to have some big changes. Scheifele's gone, Dubois gone, Hellebuck's probably gone. I think a lot of players are going to be on the way out. So I don't know how much bloodletting there's going to be, but I suspect it'll be pretty bad.
You mentioned Hellebuck. Is he a free agent, or you think they're going to trade him?
Trade for sure. I think they're not going to let him go to free agency because, for one thing, they can't afford his next contract. It sounds like Friedman was talking about him wanting to be like the highest paid goalie in the league. Jets just aren't going to do that. As much as we would love them to, they don't have the money. And even if they did, this team has always been very budget conscious, so they're not going to do it.
All right, well, that means lots of changes coming to Winnipeg. That does it for our Jets review here on the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup. Be sure to subscribe to or follow Locked On Winnipeg Jets for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.